I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Life Today Live. I'm Jordan Murphy, so excited to be your host for today. I'm excited because we get to talk about something that I've actually been struggling with myself. So it's not only going to be a ministry opportunity for you and your friends, but it's also a ministry opportunity for me. I've been able to talk with our guest a little bit before this, Reagan, and she is absolutely incredible. You are going to just love her. And so I just invite you today, set down the measuring stick and pick up the gift that God has for us, the gift of now. And Hope is going to talk with us over that today and minister to our hearts in her book, Now Over Next, Conquering the Fear of Missing Out. Hope, I'm so excited to welcome you onto the program. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we're excited for what you have for us.
Oh my goodness, Jordan, I am so excited. I have enjoyed talking to you before this so much, and I'm ready for you to come to Bentonville. Let's do it.
Girl, we just became besties in 5 minutes, and I'm excited. I'm excited for today. Girls' weekend. Yeah. Bentonville, here I come. So now over next, where did FOMO kind of start for you? How did God lay this ministry and this mission and this story on your heart?
Oh my goodness. So like we were talking about earlier, God is so just awesome to give us something that typically we're about to walk through or walking through. And so I had gotten a double book deal and I wasn't quite sure what this book was going to be about. Nothing was set in stone. And so I remember at the time I was driving back and forth to Oklahoma City. I was working for YouVersion, the Bible app, and every week I would go in and, be with my team. And as I was doing those drives is when I was really praying about this message. And so at first, Jordan, I was like, I think it's going to be on fear, like doing the thing. And I remember one of those drives, for whatever reason, I just kind of felt like the Holy Spirit nudged me and was like, Hope, it's a little deeper than this. I think the fear of missing out, that's actually something that people are struggling with. It's not necessarily the fear of going after everything. It's actually the fear of missing out and sitting back, because the world just tells us we've got to keep achieving the next and the next and the next. And so on those drives, as I was processing, I'm like, yeah, that sounds right. But I didn't even know what I was about to be walking through, which is crazy. So that's kind of how the message got birthed. But only God could have made the timing perfect for what's actually in the book and what actually happened to me next.
What did he lead you to next after that car ride, after he placed this story and this mission on your heart?
Oh my goodness. So this is the crazy part. I always just thought I would be a working mom. So after college, I went to Pepperdine. That's a whole God story in itself. I had anonymous donors, Jordan, literally 8 days before college, anonymous donors gave me a full ride tuition scholarship. So I ditched my plans to go to Arkansas Tech University. I'm a girl from a town of 10,000. I went for the first time ever to Malibu and packed up 3 suitcases. But God had just really put on my heart when I was at Pepperdine to go and work corporate, which is crazy because I talk about this in the book, but I went from the girl from a town of 10,000 who literally Googled what is a Fortune 500 in college to working for Fortune 1. So I spent the majority of my career working for Walmart Inc., hence why I'm in Bentonville, Arkansas. And while I was there, I just really, really climbed the corporate ladder. And my husband and I knew we wanted a family, but I knew with how much I was working and how much I was chasing success and how much my worth was in what I was doing, that having a baby that wasn't the best environment, and I was going to have to change something in me that I really didn't want to change, which was my work. And so when we finally decided to have my daughter, I knew something was going to actually have to shift. And my husband and I, through a lot of conversation, I actually ended up took a step back and worked for YouVersion, the Bible app, which was awesome. But it was during these car rides, around the time I started writing this book, that the Lord started pressing in this desire in my heart to actually step away from all of, work, all of, the very place where I found so much of my identity, and actually be a stay-at-home mom. And for me, this just seemed crazy. Even Jordan, when we would put our budget on paper, I'd already taken a large pay cut to go do ministry work, but then going from that to zero, my husband was like, we can't actually make this happen. There's no way. So I remember praying, Jordan, during this time as I'm kind of writing this book, kind of starting to play around with this message. just praying to God, like, Lord, if you want me to be a stay-at-home mom and this is like the desire, this is your desire that you're placing in me, like you make this happen. Well, God used a really unfortunate circumstance where actually my in-laws were thinking about starting a daycare franchise, the same daycare franchise that my daughter was in. And when the owners of her franchise found out, they actually told us they no longer wanted her in daycare, their daycare. So Jordan, it couldn't have been more clear. The Lord was calling me to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. But with that, I mean, like, he didn't give us much time. It was kind of like the Pepperdine circumstance, except this time it wasn't like me jumping into a full ride. It was like me jumping into like, what are you doing?
Now you're gonna experience the opposite. Yeah.
It was like the opposite of fear of missing out. And so I just remember me and my husband were like praying, and my boss at YouVersion, oh my gosh, Terry Storch, love him. He was just like, Lord, I pray that they will just like, you will just provide an even better caretaker for Remy and an even better place for Remy. And in that moment, I just started crying. So I'm like, it is me. Like, this is the confirmation. So Jordan, we sold my brand new dream mom car, a Yukon, on Facebook Marketplace. This was in February of 2024. So coming up on a year. I'm still sharing a truck with my husband, Will. It's awesome. And it has just been so cool because everything that I thought we'd be missing out on, which a lot of it was like a financial perspective, because that was the one thing, we were looking at numbers on a paper, and the numbers on the paper were telling us we would be negative every month. And I like sit here today and like God has provided every single need, like maybe not so much more. And it's the least we've ever had, like as far as a couple and a family. But Jordan, I just can't tell you like how much more fulfilled I am, how much more purposeful I feel. Of course, being a stay-at-home mom, like there are days that it's really hard, and there's days that honestly, I don't know, even last week I was talking to my husband, Will, and I'm like, I'm kind of grieving like this old season of my life. And it's been a year, and I'm kind of processing just how much my life has changed in the last, 3 years, 2 years, 1 year. But man, God has just been so faithful, and he's really taught me that when you do step into what he's calling you to, or lean into the nudge that, you keep kind of feeling but wanting to ignore, or just kind of scared of what's on the other side, that when you're just walking with him, there's no such thing as missing out. There's really not. Like my husband the other day was like, hey, I think we're to the point where we could probably get you a car. Like, I think we've, kind of got our feet on the ground. And I'm like, I like the truck. Like, no one's messing with us. And then he's like, okay, who was messing with you before? But I'm like, it's nice. It's safe. I like it. Like, it's used. It's perfect. It's a car. Like, but anyways, I just look back at my old life. And I mean, at one point during, I was like 26. I was traveling first class to India, to China, to Canada on all these business trips with Walmart, driving a Mercedes. All of this money, like I didn't even have time to spend it because I was working so much. And I just look back and I'm like, man, I like had that feeling for a while that God had more for me, but I was just so scared because I talk about this a bit in the book, but I think it's that descent off the ladder that's almost harder than the climb. If you think of a ladder of like achieving the next rung, whether that's the next step in your relationship or the next following count on Instagram, or it's like the next promotion or the dream college, whatever that next step is for you. Like, I think descending down is so much harder almost because you're thinking, and FOMO wants to remind you, the fear of missing out wants to remind you, like, what if you regret it? Like, what if you misstep? What if everyone watches you fall? Like, what if you've reached your peak and you never reach where you once were again? Like, what if you're irrelevant? Like those were all the things going through my head. But God was so kind because I think he knew like he had to give me a snap decision and a decision where it was very obvious. So it made the FOMO somewhat easier, but I mean, it was still pretty hard and a little cringe putting my brand new Yukon on Facebook Marketplace for all of my friends.
Like, somebody come buy my car.
Please. So yeah, that's just a little of the story and I guess my downward climb, but really upward.
No, seriously, really, really upward. And I thank you so much for sharing that, because even if, guys, if your story doesn't look exactly like that, we've all felt that when God has you in a transitional moment, it can be honestly so scary, and it can feel and look like to the outside world that we're going down the ladder, but really it's moving up the mountain to the next like glorious sight that God has for us, And so thank you so much for sharing that. And I've got to know, when those feelings of FOMO come, or when they came, God
Yeah.
gave you that split second decision, but I'm sure it was really hard to wrestle with those thoughts. Is it as easy as giving it up to him, or what does that look like to kind of wrestle with those thoughts and remind yourself of where God has you and why God has you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a daily thing for me, honestly, and I talk a lot about that in the book that like transformation and I know it's kind of cliche, but I have done a lot of research on like the journey of a caterpillar to a butterfly. And as I was doing that, like 67% of a butterfly's life is actually in like the preparation phase. And it's so crazy because when it goes in its chrysalis, which I didn't know this before, maybe the listeners know this and are like pros on the butterfly life cycle. But like the butterfly, like when it goes in its chrysalis, it literally goes from a caterpillar and turns to like a liquid goo, which is kind of gross, kind of crazy. But every single cell that it needed to become a butterfly was actually already within it. And it rearranges and then it pops out, this butterfly. And I just think that it's so cool because that is the part that I feel like we're in most of our lives where everything we have and need for every single season and every single like transformation that God is calling us into and the new creation, that the new work he does daily, it's all in here. But it just takes him, moving the different pieces around and using the skills in different ways. And I looked at my life and I've been able to look back and see him so much. And I think that's what's really helped me. And I would just encourage a listener, like, God's done it before. I know you can say that. Like, he's going to do it again. And so for me, it was so encouraging because when I went from, Walmart to YouVersion, I remember sitting at the interview table and all of those random jobs that I did at Walmart, like leading teams who created purchase orders and then helping implement, financial tools for the company and all these different random things, that I thought that I had learned at Walmart. When I went to work at YouVersion, I was the generosity product owner. So I was enhancing the Bible app and I really needed to understand everything with donors and where the money went and then like the global perspective and all of that too. And I'm like, I learned all that at Walmart and now God's just rearranging it and using it in a new way. And then even now in motherhood, I look and I'm like, okay, I know like some of those skills, like I'm able to teach Remy and I'm able to like plan things and think things through. And then even now that I'm a stay-at-home mom, this nonprofit randomly got birthed during her nap time one day, which we can talk about. But it's like now being a founder of a nonprofit, the leadership, I've got like 23 ambassadors around the world in like 15 countries. Like I'm leading these people all over the world. It's just like one of those things where I look back and it's like the Saul to Paul moment where it's like, okay, God met me on that road. And that road where I was just on a road to just myself. Like I was just wanting to climb and I was wanting to achieve, just as Saul, was going and literally like killing Christians. The Lord literally met me in that place, just as he met Saul. And it was like the Lord called me up and out and was like, Hope, there's more. Like you've known there's more, but there is more. And I feel like he really kind of like, just as he blinded Saul, he really just disenchanted a lot of the things that I thought were like so sparkly. And it was like that was how I became, kind of numb and blind to where I had been. And I really wanted him to come through. And it's like, man, the Saul to Paul, like everything in Saul, think of how much influence and stuff he had to have to be leading people and doing what he was doing and then converting to Paul. I mean, it's just like there's that moment for all of us. And so what I'd really talk about in the book is like the old Hope, the transformation in the middle, and then who I am today. And, sometimes it's hard because I do look back and like the FOMO hits and I'm like, I don't even recognize myself anymore. Like I was laughing with you, Jordan, but like the back half of my hair like isn't curled. I had about 10 minutes in between, my mother-in-law grabbing my toddler Remy and hopping on this interview. But it's like, this is where God has me now. Like if God needed me to prep and like really prepare and, look perfect, he would give me that space. But I just trust that my time with Remy this morning was where he wanted me. And this is where he needs me right now. And, I'm here. And so I think that's really helped is just knowing. And I'll end with this on this question, but there was another working mom and I've said this, very blatantly in my book, but if you're a working mom, like that's where God has you. That's great. And if you're a stay-at-home mom, that's where God has you. And that's great. And I truly don't regret the year that I was a working mom. And I may be a working mom again at some point, and That's great. But I had a fellow working mom at YouVersion. Her name's Lacey. She walked up to me when I was telling her that I was quitting and going to be a stay-at-home mom. And she looked at me and this made me cry. And she was like, Hope, I just want you to know you're impacting millions of lives here at YouVersion every day, right? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, and it's all for God, right? And I was like, yeah. I was like, that's what makes this so hard. And she was like, think about how important Remy's one life is. If God is pulling you out of impacting these 1 million people and making your assignment Remy and your family. And it like gives me chills saying that, but like you just have to trust, you know, I actually heard Sadie Robertson Huff say like, you know, a confused or a guilty mom raises confused kids. And it's like you just and that goes not just for being a mom, but anywhere you are. Like don't let the shame and guilt of where God has you now make you think you need more or anything like that. Like just focus on what he has now. And I promise you, like that's the most important assignment. And that's what you just like really, I think, have to believe because and it has to come from your heart and you believing it because you know the world's going to tell you you need to be a million different places and doing a million different things. But you just have to stay so centered of like, this is where God has me now. And that is the most important assignment I could possibly be doing, or else he would pull me out and make it so evident and clear to be somewhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. Because no matter what you're doing, whether you're a working mom or a stay-at-home mom or a working dad, stay-at-home, wherever you are, Satan has an amazing way of always making what you're doing and what's the opposite of what you're doing look a lot better. Of, oh, what if you just did this? The grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah.
But just like you're saying, if you stay in the perspective that the Lord has given you for your life, that there's contentment in that, you know. But the world is so obsessed with ambition and career success. So maybe for the working mom, maybe for somebody in the corporate world, how do you balance that ambition and wanting career success with contentment? Because a lot of times the world is saying, just go, find your way up the ladder. But we know that there's true peace and contentment. So how do you wrestle with that? How do you navigate that?
Yeah. So I think now, you know, starting this nonprofit and it being birthed from literally nothing this year. So I'll give a quick, long story short
Let us
moment.
know,
But
girl.
yeah, so after I quit and became a stay-at-home mom in April, I randomly, so Dayspring, I have a great relationship with them, and they had given me like a pack of free cards. And I remember during Remy's nap time just saying like, hey, I'm gonna record myself like writing a card. I was writing it to my sister, and I'm just gonna ask who wants some Christian encouragement sent to their mailbox. So Jordan, I thought like 40 people would say yes. We're at over 26,000 women across 110 countries, and all of that happened in about 6 months. And so now, you know, I kind of wrestle with this tension of this thing has blown up, and the nonprofit's called Purpose Doesn't Pause. And, you know, I wrestle with this tension of like, God has me at home. And, you know, there's also, you know, I've got to fundraise. Like, I'm the only one fundraising for this nonprofit. I'm the one, like, just getting the ambassadors stood up, making sure these postcard parties. So basically other women around the world are volunteering and writing these postcards with me. And so we sent out, I think last year, 13,000 in those 6 months. And those were just other girls around the world, like Taiwan, South Africa, I mean, New Zealand, craziness.
Wow.
But I think something that I wrestle with, right, is like, man, I don't really have boundaries. Like my daughter's here. I can talk on the phone if I need to. Obviously it won't be very productive, but I can. And so I think when this first started happening, I started trying to plan things just like I did before, like, you know, business partners, cadences, meetings, all of these things. And obviously Remy's a toddler. And so her schedule was just very, not very reliable or like consistent. And so I think I've actually figured out the contentment of just like, you know what? If God plans to do this, he will. And just staying in this place of like, am I striving, or is this feel like natural and at peace? Have I prayed about this? And I'm saying that as far as like reaching out to people or trying to plan these events or whatever. And it's like, if I'm from a place where I'm like, okay, I have some space to do this, I have energy, Remy is taken care of first, then I go for it. But if I'm coming from a place where I'm like, I'm exhausted, you know, I'm not in a healthy place, like this is me trying to prove what this nonprofit is, then I don't need to do it. And so sometimes that's looked like me not feeling great and telling someone, hey, I can't take this donor call today, I'll have to catch you another time. And it's me just being like, you know what, if that's who's supposed to give the money, like the Lord will do the work, the hard work. Like I don't have to do this. And so it's been super cool. Like for this next year, we're like short $6,500 for operations, but Dayspring covered 20,000 postcards for this next year. So those are covered. And I'm like, okay, the card part's covered. Like the Lord will cover like the shipping and all of that. And so it's been really sweet. Like I texted a friend today and I'm like, this is awkward, but part of stewarding this well is like I was at the park with Rumi and I sent a quick voice memo to her and I'm like, we need this much money. And she's like, oh yeah, we already have you on our list. My parents and I are about to do like a meeting next week and we're gonna let you know how much money we can give you because we're like so excited about this work. So it's like I just trust God. And I know that sounds crazy, but there's just been like so many moments in my life where I've just seen him come through that I'm like, he gave me a full $70,000 from random people that I didn't even know to go to Pepperdine. Like, can't he cover shipping for these postcards? And we already have the postcards covered.
He's got the
Like,
6K, girl. Yeah.
the hard part is the postcards.
Yeah.
Like, we got that. It's just, some shipping. So, anyways, I think just, wrestling and with that is obviously something I wrestle with, but just realizing like I'm not going to miss out on an opportunity from the Lord. And when it's God's will, like I'm not big enough to stop his plans and no amount of rest can stop what he's doing. And I love like what Job says, and I think it's 42 too, but he's like, I know the plans and the purpose of the Lord and nothing can be thwarted. And it's like nothing of God's can be stopped. And that's what after Job had gone through all that suffering, like that's what he says at the very end of the book. And so I'm like, yeah, I just rest in that verse and I just know that I'm not big enough to stop what God has. And my priority right now is my family. And God has made that very clear. So whatever God's made your priority and your mission, like keep that the focus. And I think the rest just has to fall in place and it will fall in place. And if it doesn't, then it wasn't God's plan. I keep reminding myself that of like, if this nonprofit doesn't get the funding, then I just need to lay it down. I did it for about 8 months and it was awesome. And praise God, that was just a season.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the process? Could you bring us in a little bit deeper? Because I think a lot of times when we try to put those boundaries in place, sometimes it feels natural, but then sometimes, like you're saying, we're trying to push past what's healthy. So how in your mind do you have a certain checklist that you go through to be like, yep, I'm coming from a healthy place? What do you go through to kind of navigate whether this is coming from you and your own will or from the Lord's will? Because sometimes that's so it's such a fine line. You know what I mean?
I know. No, it is such a fine line. And even like I was saying earlier, last week I even had that moment with Will where I'm like, man, it's tight right now from a financial perspective. I mean, we're making it, but it's not as much wiggle room as we're used to, and that's hard. And so sometimes I was telling him, like, I feel guilty sometimes that and I know I could go get maybe another job at Walmart and I am not. And I think just something you have to sit down and something that I've been doing is one, I recenter on this probably every few months, is just what are my priorities in this season? Like, what is the mission God has given me? And so that can look as simple as like, it's taking my kids to school and being present. Then it's going to work. And then it's like when I'm at lunch with coworkers, I'm there and I'm pouring into them. Like whatever that looks like, your mission field looks like, I would just write that down. And then then I see where I have margin. And so then I'm like, okay, when can I, right now, it's like, when can I realistically work? Well, Remy's and kids stay out on Monday, Thursday. And so I try to be very strategic of like, okay, these are the days that I'm going to really focus on anything outside of motherhood. And so I think just trying to find where you have margin for anything extra is helpful, and really being like strict on I'm at work during this time and this is where I'm going to be. I think the biggest thing for me is just how can I be present and focus where my feet are. And if I start noticing myself getting distracted, not able to listen, not able to like hold a conversation, then it's like, why am I even here? And so I think that has really helped me. And just, again, I think sometimes like God's will can be confusing of like, what am I supposed to be doing? But I truly believe that if you weren't supposed to be exactly where you are today, he would have called you out. And so just not letting the confusion of that and just more praying so into that of like, okay, Lord, if I'm supposed to be somewhere else, make a way, make that clear, give me nudges, has really helped me too, of just not trying to second guess where I am. Because I think that's the hardest part. If you're second guessing where you are, I mean, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that you're going to go down. And so it's like, okay, just confident in where you are. And then, really prioritizing your time and just being present.
Thank you so much. That's so, so helpful because a lot of times, I don't know if anybody else is guilty of this, but I'll get so caught up in just thinking about things and all the different outcomes rather than praying about them. And it truly is sometimes as simple as just bringing it to the Lord and exactly how you're saying, asking for a little nudge. And then sometimes He's so gracious to give us snap second decisions like He gave to you, like that's what I need, God.
You don't have
really need that.
childcare.
Yeah. Someone's going to have to watch your kid, girl. It's going to be you,
And it's going to be you. And you're the girl for the job. Congrats.
Yes. See, and He's so gracious like that, and it's so interesting because all of us are feeling so much pressure and we don't talk about it. And when we feel all that pressure, a lot of FOMO is often associated with it. And a lot of times social media plays a huge part in that. What have you seen from maybe your own life or the other women that you've ministered to, how social media has played a role in deterring them from maybe things God's had for them or words for them? How's it played in their lives?
I think social media is like the biggest place with the fear of missing out, to be honest. And it's something I have personally struggled with time and time again. And I even talk about this some in my book. But at one point, it's easy to look at these other Christian influencers, authors, speakers, and it's like their ministry's thriving. They're making, I don't know how much, but all this money off speaking engagements. And then I look at my own life and I'm like, I don't even have enough money, to send out all these postcards or whatever. And so I think that I have had to place some like serious boundaries. And at one point, I'm much better now and I've had to pray. This is a constant thing that I'm wrestling with and praying over. But just one, knowing that everything I'm seeing is probably a highlight reel. Like they're not showing themselves sick. They're not showing themselves like the hard conversations they're having to have. They're not showing what they're sacrificing to go to all these speaking engagements and be away from their families. Like all of this looks great. I even have seen women travel with their kids, which kudos to y'all who do that. But it's like, that looks so great. But then, I have traveled with my daughter and that is really not great. It is a challenge.
Like, Remy is crazy.
Yes, Remy is crazy. That girl, she loves a good flight, but she's crazy. So anyways, I think I've just had to remind myself that is not like my reality and just learn to cheer those people on that are in that place. And like I said, I've had to have boundaries. There are some times when I have had to I'll delete the app and I'll only download it to post my reel or whatever. And right now I'm really big on, I haven't been feeling super great. And so I had actually got my new book in the mail 2 days ago and I wasn't feeling good. So I didn't open it and I opened it last night and I did a reel and I'm like, hey guys, I haven't been feeling good, but today I'm feeling good. I want to open my book with y'all. But just being honest on social media, I think's helped me and just trying to be authentic and I'm going to try to do the best I can to share all of the parts, the good, the bad, the ugly, the in between. But just going on there, knowing that you can't compare your life to others. Only God has put everything inside of you that you're going to need for everything He's called you to. And God looked at the earth and the world at this point in time and was like, there needs to be a Jordan. There needs to be a Hope. There needs to be a Remy. And that is so good. And if you're trying to, be another influencer or you're trying to be another person at work or you're trying to be another girl at school or whatever, whoever you're comparing yourself to, that's missing the whole purpose of what God has for you. Yeah. And that's actually missing out when you're trying not to miss out. You know what I mean? Right. And so I think just staying in your lane and just even praying into, I've had to pray into God, what do you want me to share on social media? You've made me unlike any of these other people. What's the message you've given me? Or what experiences have I gone through that can help other people that can't, not everyone can be everyone's cup of tea. And so just getting comfortable with that and being my friend's ministry is really serving this group. My ministry is really serving this group. And great, we can't all serve everyone. This is awesome. So just, almost celebrating that and not looking at the numbers, because I think that's another thing that a lot of people focus on is, when am I going to reach this, or 2 people like this or whatever. But it's I literally just pray now, and I didn't used to, but I will just pray Lord, help this reach the one girl. If it reaches the one girl, and any post is going to get more than one view, more than likely. So it's praise God. It reached one person, and I just trust that He's bigger than any algorithm or anything else going on. And yeah, but I think it's almost that, just again focusing on this is what God has, or I wouldn't be here, or he'd have something else.
Yeah. Holy cow, Hope. Like, you just focusing on the one. I've never heard anybody say that. And it kind of gets me emotional because in the time that we're in, you're right, we care so much about the numbers, even if we're not social media influencers, or like that's maybe not our career. Like, you care if somebody likes your photo, you know, or if, oh, I only have one comment on this amazing photo I posted, you know, and or this message that I shared, like I really thought that it was going to impact. And a lot of times we think that impact is by numbers, the number of people that we're reaching.
Right.
And a lot of times we forget that God, he leaves the 99 to go after the one, you know, and when he calls us into his ministry for his purpose and his people, that's supposed to look like him, you know? And so the fact that you pray that whenever you're posting and you really are just like giving that to him, what a beautiful representation of Jesus and his ministry, but also like him working in your heart through you to bless so many people, or bless that one person, you know?
Right.
Because he's in the details. He's in the details of the one. You know?
Yeah, no, he is. And there's definitely, as you can tell, there's been a lot of humbling. This has been a long transformation journey to get here. But there, like you've said, the contentment and the peace that is found in just really believing that. And I mean, I've even been able to do a lot of ministry that no one will ever see. Like, I've become good friends. Remy loves Chick-fil-A. We go through Chick-fil-A,
girl.
sponsor us Chick-fil-A.
Come on, God's chicken. Come on.
Yeah. But like, I've become friends with like the people in the drive-through and been able to give them books and Bibles and all of these things. And like, I'm just like, Jesus was where he was. Like, he never was anywhere else other than where he was. And if that meant, you know, I think of the story of the woman who had been bleeding and like touched his cloak, and he noticed that the one woman had touched him and wanted to seek her out. It's like, just, I don't want to miss that. I don't want the Lord, when I am someday, you know, in front of him to be like, you were so focused on trying to reach so many people that you actually missed the opportunities that I put right in front of you. Like, I think we put all this pressure on ourselves, like you're saying, that it's just self-created pressure.
Yeah.
Like, I really think he's just calling us to be where we are right now and trust him that he will do what's next when it's time for next.
Yeah. And in that same token, God has just been placing on my heart that Jesus in his ministry wasn't 24/7 going, you know, exactly kind of how you were saying earlier, like, if I need to refresh, if I need to hit reset, I'm going to do that. Like, Jesus took time to go and pray and be by himself and be with the Father, or eat or take a nap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Emphasis on the nap for me.
Take a nap.
Refresh and reset, girl. And that there's so much pressure like all the time, but I love that Jesus modeled that for us, not in just going above and beyond. Like, obviously he did, you know, he did miracles and amazing things, but also he modeled it in a way of like, hey, doing my work and working for me and living your life for me does not look like XYZ. This is what it looks like. And I think a lot of times we just pick and choose. Oh, I'm gonna follow the Lord, and I'm gonna do this, but we forget the other side of it, you know, the other side that has restoration and hope and contentment and healing.
Absolutely.
And so I'm so grateful for you sharing that. And I pray that God opens our eyes and our hearts to those divine appointments, even if it's in the Chick-fil-A drive-through, you know?
Yeah.
Like, God, give me an extra nugget. Like, I don't know.
Come on. I know. It's so sweet. And I love what you say, because that's actually something that I feel like during this conversation that I haven't said, that I feel like the Lord's placed in my heart. But there's so many times that the Lord, like Jesus, he would do all these miracles, and then him and his disciples would literally have to hop in a boat and like peace out to be able to go and spend time in prayer. And it's like, I don't know, this season has not looked like I thought. I even canceled a speaking engagement here in a few weeks, sent them back their money, because I just feel like the Lord's like, you need to be home. Like, you need to be here. And I'm just like, I trust I'm not missing out. It was actually my largest speaking engagement in front of like several thousand people. And I'm just like, you know what? This isn't where he's calling me. Like, he's doing something here, and me being in my home is so much more important than the thousands of women I was going to get to speak to, my biggest engagement. And anyways, there's just, I think there's so much time. And I saw something the other day that it was like, I don't want to be in a place where I want like the pedestal more than I want like what's going to keep me there. And it's like that's so good because in order to be able to have like, influence and be speaking in all these things, like you've got to know the word. Like there's all of that. And I think in our life, there's so many, like we want to jump to all these shortcuts. And I talked about this in my book where I actually trained for a half marathon, didn't train and passed out during it because I didn't think I had to train. I'd already ran one, so I didn't think I needed to train. I woke up in Switzerland while I was studying abroad with an IV in my arm with people that only spoke French, and I had fainted. Anyways,
You're like, hello.
crazy. But I think we just want to take all these shortcuts and like have these arrival moments. But like, overnight success, I've heard this kind of quote and I'll probably butcher it, but it's like overnight success takes years. Like, and
But
it's
that's
not,
all we see. We only see
that's all we see.
the
We
pop
see the
up, but not the
highlight.
work. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I would just say for the person listening, like God's word is active and alive. It can change you from the inside out. And that's a place where I'd spend the most time in that and prayer. And if you're doing that, like God's gonna speak to you. Like you're giving him space to be in your life. You're inviting him in, whatever that looks like. Looks different for me every day. And yeah, I mean, I think you just can't miss out. And he will take you and he'll provide for you and he will equip you and you can just focus on the moment. You don't have to be so worried about what's next.
Yeah. A lot of times we know the right answers, but we don't necessarily feel the peace. We don't feel the contentment. We don't feel,
Right.
we know that we shouldn't have FOMO and we know why we shouldn't, but a lot of times we don't feel that way. How can we check our hearts, or what do you say to the person who's like, I feel like I'm doing all of the right things, but for some reason I feel stuck in a hallway and I don't know how to treasure the now because I don't even know what the next is and I don't even know what the right now looks like. What is your encouragement to them?
Oh my goodness. I think I've been there so many times. And I mean, I'd even say I'm there right now. Like
Me too, girl.
I'm like, I really, if I were to focus on what was next, I think it would be so overwhelming. But yeah, I think my encouragement would just be if you really genuinely feel like you're doing all the right things and you just feel stuck, I would just ask God to either just reveal to you what he's still teaching you or reveal to you like an area that he's still working on and just pray for ways to, develop what he's preparing because he wouldn't call you to like he wouldn't just leave you. He hasn't forgotten you. And there's been so many times that I have felt like forgotten, especially with this fundraising stuff for this nonprofit. This has been a beast of something to take on. But even right now, like there's actually a girl who quit her job and she's been trying to fundraise her salary. I've only been able to pay her $200. And I mean, her faith has just increased mine so much because she's like, I have saved some money. I'm living with my parents. My parents are paying for my groceries. And she actually just picked up a job on Saturdays so she can work for the nonprofit during the week and make some money on Saturdays. And she's like, I feel kind of left out. I kind of feel forgotten. Like, I like trusted that the Lord would provide for me and he's provided $200, which was a week her engine went out in her car. Anyway, so it just like basically reimbursed her for an expense she wasn't expecting. But anyways, like her face increased mine because she's like, I have what I need. I'm just going to trust that, God's still doing some work in other people's hearts and he's still doing some work in me and there's a reason for all of this. And so I think, it may feel delusional at times where you're like, I just trust that he's doing something, but I genuinely promise you, and I know this to be true. Like, I really believe the veil between earth and heaven is so tiny. And I really believe, there's so many verses. And one that's like coming to me is this verse that talks about God being this mighty warrior and like he down from heaven. And it's like, he can change things overnight. And that's something that me and my team have been focusing on of like, he could fully fund all of this overnight. So like, let's just be ready. Like, let's just be expectant. And so I think rather than feeling sorry for yourself or kind of moping or feeling like I've been here forever, just like, God, I'm expectant that like, if it's taken this long, like you're really working some behind the scenes, like things behind here. And it's going to be like so much bigger and better than I can believe. And one practical example is like one night Remy, I went to get her a bottle because she'd been crying and it was dark in her room. And I took out her passy and she like screamed because she thought this passy was like, like the best thing ever, which we do need to wean her soon. She's almost 2. We'll
That's
work on
another
that.
podcast.
Yeah, that's another podcast. But yeah, anyways, I gave her, she didn't know I had a bottle like in my hand. And I, as her mom, I felt like God was like reminding me that like when he takes something or like we feel like he's neglected us or like, done something that was awesome that we loved. I think about like my dream job at YouVersion. Like I love that job and him taking away. I had to remember, like, it's like the bottle I had for Remy. Like he had, I had something so much better for her, something that was sustainable, something that was going to fill her, unlike a passy could ever fill her up. And, I feel like that's so true with God. Like he has something, we can't always see it. We're often in the dark, but we just have to believe like he is my father. He loves me so much. If he took this from me or I feel neglected in this way or I feel forgotten, like he's just got something better and it just may not be exactly when we want it or need it or think we need it, whatever, but he's not going to let us down. Like he hasn't let us down. He's not going to.
Yeah. I have nothing to say after that. I feel so like filled and just whole and warm and fuzzy because it's just when you really get to hear the word and especially be able to hear something that you needed to hear specifically, it's so powerful and it's beautiful to see how God has orchestrated your story. And you said like he prepared you for, the next step in your previous step, and it just
right.
on speaking even over your nonprofit for just a second, it's like, could you imagine if you weren't obedient to him in choosing to stay home? The nonprofit, it would have never happened, and all of these women would have never been impacted. And it's incredible how, because you've chosen to be so humbled for him, he is just taking you to the next level and the next thing, even if that looks to the world like sliding down the ladder or a humbling, but he's exalting you for him. And it's just so beautiful. And I'm so grateful to just be on the other side of this and just being able to hear about you and your story and your testimony today. And so just thank you so much for being with us today. I just so appreciate it.
Oh my goodness. No, Jordan, I love it. I'm ready to hang out with you in real life. This is so
I
fun.
know. We really need to coordinate this after this is all over.
Yeah. Any Bentonville girlies, join us for Girls Weekends.
We can write some cards too. That would be really
Let's
fun.
do it.
Hey, so
Yes.
for people that want to connect with you, right? We have purposedoesn'tpause.org. What can they all find on purposedoesn'tpause.org?
Yeah, so you guys can find a way to sign up for a free postcard from us and the team. There's also free events around the US and even in different countries that are popping up. So you can click on the events. There's actually a Purpose Doesn't Pause podcast that just shares women's testimonies. Dayspring sponsors it. It's really sweet. So that link is there too. And then, we just want to encourage you, lift you up. And then we have a free app as well, where I do some Zoom Bible studies. Everything's free. We just want to make everything accessible and try to get God's word out.
Wow, that's awesome. That's so awesome. So make sure you check out purposedoesn'tpause.org and make sure you get Now Over Next, Conquering the Fear of Missing Out by Hope Reagan Harris. Hope, thank you so much for being on with us today. We pray blessings over you, and we will see you all next time at Life Today Live.
Thank you.
To choose to come, to choose to bend our necks, to choose to bend our necks, and to choose to learn.